satisfy me. Hey, she always keeps me satisfied. That's Philly Satellite and Doug Shannon. And Stephen King has dropped by to harass me this morning.
It's your spider, Doug.
Yes,
you should see this. I mean, if the people out there could see this, they'd turn off their radios and run screaming. It's a great big tarantula. If you scratch it on the mic. Can you hear that?
Oh, yeah.
That's the sound of the killer tarantula, ladies and gentlemen. Hey. One more summer, one more beat from this old heart to make her mine. Give me one more summer, one more summer, one more heart, one more beat from this old heart to make her mine.
CBA, April 15th is her wedding day. I drown my sorrow, I drown my trouble, I drank her dry, and then I rubbed that bottle. A vision and a vision and a vision harder for me. And Jeannie had one
Stephen King, master of Macabre. A rattlesnake that somebody sent me. Just sort of came in the mail. And vampire bats come in the mail. And in fact, I have 2 vampire bats. This guy looks like he's trying to break out. I don't know if you can see it, but the top has gotten decidedly sweaty. So it's the sort of thing where I've never objected. People are going to call you what they're going to call you. And I don't see any sense in arguing with that. I just write my stories.
Are you influenced by classical horror authors?
We all are, to some degree. For me, the trick was to find some kind of bridge between the sort of Gothic horror stories that were written in the 18th century and the world that I live in today, the modern world. Frankenstein was never a book that really excited me very much. Dracula was, but they're both set in Europe, and there's a feeling of antiquity about them. There are castles, moors, and I don't live in that world. I live in a world, small towns, modern American people, automobiles, drive-ins, McDonald's, Burger King, bowling alleys.
Burger King?
Burger King. No relation to me. It might be possible to bring, for instance, a vampire to America. And I wrote a novel called Salem's Lot, where a European vampire comes to a small Maine town,
Jerusalem's Lot.
Jerusalem's Lot, and settles in and opens an antique store and turns this whole town of boarding house owners and barbers, small-town policemen, into vampires. And it worked like a bomb. I learned from what I read, and I imitated what I liked. And little by little, I found my own voice. When I read H.P. Lovecraft, everything that I wrote came out sounding like H.P. Lovecraft. When I read Ray Bradbury, everything came out and sounded like Ray Bradbury. Nothing that I wrote sounded like Stephen King, but that was okay because as a kid of 14 or 15 or 16, you don't exist. You're not there yet. You haven't arrived. You're still busy making yourself. And the other thing that happened with me is people would say, you ought to write about what you know. But what I knew was boring. I grew up in a small town. We had no running water. I went to a one-room school with all the grades together, and somebody had to go up to a house and bring back water. And to me, the whole existence was not pastoral or beautiful or anything. It was just boring. I wanted to be in outer space. I wanted to fight monsters in the swamps of the Amazon. So those were the things that I wrote about. And later I found a way to blend those two interests. My interest in what was strange and alien and the places where I lived and where I grew up and the people that I knew. Jesus, can't believe that.
This reminds you very much of your childhood, this neighborhood?
Yes, it does. It does. Same dirt road, same old Grange Hall at the end of the road. Everybody's got a dog tied up behind their house, barks all night long.
That's you.
That's me when I sold my first story. I look a little bit surprised about the whole thing. Yeah, that's me. This is my mother and my brother, who is 2 years older. He lives in New Hampshire now and runs an appliance shop. My mother's dead. She died of cancer in 1973. And that's me. Our father deserted us when I was 2. According to my mother, he told her one night he was going to go out for a package of cigarettes and just never came back. From the way she describes him, I've had such good fortune in my own life, I almost think he would have shown up with his hand out for some money. But he never has, and my guess is he's probably dead. He was kind of a rake and a bounder. He wrote himself, submitted stories to a lot of the pulp magazines of the 40s and early 50s, Argosy, Weird Tales, the Saturday Evening Post, things like that, and had some encouraging letters back, but my mother said he never had the ambition to stick to it and break through.
So, but one can say that the imagination comes probably from him.
I would guess so. You know, we found boxes of his things in his books and papers, and he was a navigator in the Merchant Marine. And we found boxes of his books and papers in my aunt's attic. And I'd started to publish Weird Tales by then, and I found a whole box of paperbacks about monsters and demons and boogeymen. So apparently he had some of the same interests.
What does it mean if you have to grow up without a father?
It means that you're a little more insecure, I think, than you would be otherwise. You only have the one parent. And I used to wonder what would happen to me if my mother should die when I was a kid. I'd be an orphan, and I wasn't sure exactly what that would mean, to be an orphan.
You didn't change too much in all those years.
Well, I think that I learned how to open my eyes on camera. I'm not sure. That was taken when I was 11, and the school photographer would come in with a huge old camera with a great big flash attachment on top with a hood so that he could focus it right at your eyes, and everybody learned to look at the camera, and he'd say, now open your eyes wide, and you'd open your eyes wide, and he would go for the trigger, and then you'd go, like that, so everybody turned into a little Chinaman.
But was there already at that time the fascination for...
Yes, for the macabre.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a child it was always there. I loved the horror comics. I saved up my allowance to go see the horror movies like The Black Scorpion or The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Anything that had monsters in it, it scared me, but it excited me at the same time.
You also went to the movies, to horror movies.
All I could. They used to have Saturday matinees. And on Saturday afternoon, we'd all line up, usually with our money tied in a handkerchief or something so we wouldn't lose it. And I wrote about some of this stuff in a book called It. It's funny. I think a lot of us have only the haziest memories of our childhood because we don't try very hard to remember. We can access some of the good memories, and maybe we can access some of the really bad memories if a bully beat us up on the schoolyard or something like that. But what I discovered in writing it was that the more I thought about my childhood from 1953 to, say, 1959, the more those memories came back, standing in line with a quarter, how mean the lady was at the you know, the little glass booth, the ticket booth. She wanted to see your money. She'd wear this bright, bright lipstick, and she had mean wrinkles all down her face, and we used to call her Godzilla, you know. And then we'd get in the theater, and everybody would turn their popcorn boxes into bugles, and there'd be the cartoon and the news of the world, and then the giant grasshoppers would come on and destroy Chicago or London, and that was great. It was a great way. I can remember going to the movies, walking down. It was a walk of maybe 2 miles, and I'd see kids in their front yard, and I'd feel so bad for them because they weren't going to the movies. Because for me, they were very important. And then I'd go home afterwards and write stories that were based on the movies that I'd seen.
For goodness sake, I got the hippie shake. Yeah, I got the shake. I got the hippie shake.
Usually around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, I'll come up here, crank up some rock and roll on the stereo, and write until about noon. And a lot of times at night, after everybody's gone to bed or everybody's someplace else, I'll come up again and work on something else that's just kind of fun. So,
How many pages do you write a day? A lot.
well, I'm working on the rewrite of something now, a book called The Stand, where I'm putting copy back in. So I try to stick to about 8 pages a day. Sometimes it goes a little faster than other times. And in the summertime, it gets hot up here. This used to be the barn. So it gets very warm, and I like to get out of here in a hurry if I can.
But eight pages a day, it means that you can have a few books a year.
I could, if they were all good, but on the other hand, I've got something here that I spent most of the fall working on, and the winter. This is called On the Island. It's a piece of shit. I'm sorry, but it is. Before we're born, it's like God throws meteorites at our brains, and they land in there, and they're embedded, and they're full of some kind of alloy, and sooner or later, you feel a magnetism, you feel a pull in a certain direction. And for me, it's always been stories of make-believe. And I like to scare people. You know, my idea about what you're supposed to do with the reader is sort of say, I got something to tell you. Come on. Come on, it's right around here. Come on. Come on.